But just a short note from my perspective, Jacqui's been an amazing supporter of the local startup community. And supports the bar camps and startup camps that I organize, and without question, we've been doing this stuff for us, and it's been a lot of help, and been nice to hear. So it'd been nice to have that help for her. It's been a while now. It's been about 3 years. So.
Wow.
I know.
That's terrifying in itself.
Oh, it's been the first bar camp, but really? That long ago? But, so I asked Jacqui to come and talk about what she talks about best. So I'll let her introduce herself, the big ramble that's on here, or whatever she wants to say. So.
That's good. So thank you for moving from one room to another. I really appreciate having some people in the audience. Jesse has asked me to talk about managing equity and team building. And I have a bit of experience in both of those areas. I have been a venture capital investor now for 9 years, so a good chunk of my career. Prior to being a venture capital investor, I worked in a startup technology company that was acquired by Cisco at the peak of the bubble. So very good timing on the part of our CEO and CFO. I much appreciated that. And so I've experienced startup life. I've experienced the life of working for a big company. And then I've also experienced building a whole whack of early stage technology companies, some of which have grown into fairly large technology companies over the last 9 years. So just a little disclaimer before I start, I have a Kung Fu class right after this. So if I'm up here stretching and warming up, that's why. In terms of questions, please ask them throughout the presentation because I will have to run very quickly at the end. And my last slide is also contact information for me. So if you have any questions that you don't ask me during this presentation, please feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with an answer. So interactive is good. I love interactive. If I'm not covering something that you want me to cover, just interrupt me and we'll go there. So my first slide, you can see I've got a little asterisk next to team. And Ali talked a little bit about how he does team building at well.ca. And I thought I would take a slightly different slant on the word team and talk about an extended team. So we can talk a little bit about building out your team from a management perspective, building out your employee team, but I also wanted to talk about getting people to work for your business that don't actually work at your company. So looking at an expanded community view of team, which I think is incredibly important these days. Is there a page down? I don't use a Mac. Ah, there we go. Okay. And I get technology, since I've been a technology investor now for a long time. Just not Macs, although I'm going to try and change that. Okay, so venture capital. Just a quick survey. How many people in this audience feel they have a good understanding of what venture capital is? Okay. And in terms of distribution school-wise, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, grad? Okay, excellent. So when I first became a venture capitalist, and I don't even like to say venture capitalist, venture capital investor, I knew absolutely nothing about venture capital other than the fact that when I was working at my startup company, or the startup company, I wasn't the founder, I communicated with them through press releases every once in a while. And from time to time, there would be this big gang that would walk through the office, and all of us would cower in our cubicles and try to be on our best behavior because the investors were here. So I really didn't have a very good understanding of what venture capital is. So venture capital is a way of financing your company. It is going through some pretty significant change right now as an industry. I would call it being in an industry in crisis right now, right across North America and other parts of the world as well. As you know, the financial ecosystem is in a bit of crisis, and it's trickled all the way down to us as venture capital investors and you as entrepreneurs. So venture capital as an asset class, so as a way of funding your startup, is very much changing, and it's becoming more and more difficult to raise venture capital, which I think could potentially be a blessing in disguise, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We at Tech Capital are currently investing our second fund. So what we do is every 4 years we go out and we raise a bucket of cash, and we then take that cash and we deploy it into technology companies. And every venture capital investor has a mandate, and our mandate used to be investing in Waterloo region-based companies at the seed stage. It's now expanded beyond Waterloo region, but we still very much get involved at the seed stage of investing, and then we, as the company progresses, invest at various financing rounds as the company grows. We have $95 million under management. Our last fund closed in July of 2005, so if you do the math, 2005, 4 years, we are starting to fundraise, which is painful. Painful for entrepreneurs, even more painful for venture capital investors, and it's not a part of the job that I particularly enjoy. Fundraising for entrepreneurs is not a particularly fun process either. We've invested in 14 portfolio companies, and on the next slide I'll take you through a couple of those. And we typically, the lowest we will go is a $250,000 investment in a company. Some of you might have heard of things like Y Combinator or Techstars. Have any of you guys heard of those? So they invest much smaller amounts of capital for smaller amounts of equity. We are a seed Series A stage investor, and that's typically a $250,000 minimum. Many technology sectors, we invest in almost all technology sectors except for biotech, life sciences, so we have a fairly diverse portfolio of companies. Most of them are in the IT sector, communications, mobile, digital media sectors. And we're very hands-on, so we've actually invested in, yes?
Sorry, what do you mean by full cycle on the previous slide, full cycle investment?
We'll invest at the seed stage, Series A, Series B, Series C. So we will get involved at the seed stage. We like to be the first investor around the table or part of a syndicate of investors, a group of investors who participate in your first round, but then we'll invest all the way through, which is important. You want to make sure that the investor that you bring to the table can participate all the way through. So these are our portfolio companies right now. We're just about to close an investment in a new company, which is very exciting, especially with the state of the venture capital industry right now. We're very excited to bring on another company. 5 of these 14 that we've invested in are in the mobile space, so have some expertise in mobile. So Metronome is mobile, Cydence is mobile, Avasi is mobile, Icera is mobile. They used to be Serific Wireless, but they were acquired. And LiveHive now has a mobile component. So, yes?
Just change the logo for either
Yes.
Oh my. This is actually supposed to say post-rank, which is particularly embarrassing since the founder of the company is in the audience. Hallie?
Why don't you invest in biotech?
We just don't know anything about it. So we try to invest in areas that we are familiar with, where we have networks and connections and where we can add value from an industry perspective. And biotech is just so incredibly different. You know, it's a 10-year life cycle. You have to go through FDA regulations and all these different things. So it's not something that we get, and we can't add much value to those types of companies. I'm totally embarrassed about that logo, by the way. That's going to completely throw me off the rest of the presentation. So getting back to business fundamentals, financing fundamentals, there are essentially 3-4 ways to finance your companies. Revenue, and you'll hear me harp on this later in the presentation. I truly believe that revenue is the best way to finance your company, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Government programs, which are becoming the second easiest way to get financing, but I'm finding these days that we have built a culture of entrepreneurs who are fantastic at selling themselves to government agencies. And I would like to encourage all of you to focus on customers and revenue before you focus on applying for government programs. Government programs can be a good filler and a good way of leveraging your revenues and leveraging other capital that's coming into your company, but they can be very time consuming in terms of going through the application process. I've seen so many entrepreneurs time after time spend hours filling out forms for government funding only to be told that the program has been canceled. And it's absolutely killing me to see entrepreneurs with amazing ideas and great value propositions spending all their time selling to government when they could be selling to customers. And then the other 2 things, equity and debt. So equity is where venture capital falls. It's also where angel investors fall, where people put some money into your company and they actually get a piece of the equity or the ownership in your company. And then debt financing is essentially getting a loan to finance your company. So that would be credit cards, that would be borrowing money from your parents or your friends or your family, that kind of thing. So I wanted to look at this whole concept of equity from a couple of different perspectives. First, the entrepreneur's perspective. And I probably, before I get to this slide, so don't look at this slide, what are the types of questions that you guys have about equity? Like, do you think about equity? Do you think about, yeah?
I'm interested to know how you really value what a potential partner should be, depending on what stage they come in at.
Yep.
And really, when is somebody no longer considered a founder? I mean, if they come in at an early stage, they still might be considered a founder. And kind of how do you value what their work is in terms of like a percentage of your company? And how can you tie that to, I guess, performance measures of how you're able to give it out in a way that you're not kind of one time drive if they decide to leave?
Right, right. Okay, so great questions, and I'm sure a ton of you have that perspective right now. Yep?
I'll just say that you need to talk to him after, when you're not at Kung Fu,
Okay,
because he's probably got a lot of specific questions, actually.
cool, yeah.
Just more than-
Feel free to reach out. All good questions that I've heard many, many times before, especially at the founding stage of a company. So a lot of people will come to the table, and we've seen everything from, there are 4 founders, we each get 25% of the company, we've started this together, to there are 2 founders, but I'm the guy who had the idea, I have the patent, I have spent 10 years of my life as a professor researching this area, so I'm going to take 90%, and my grad student has done a little bit of work, so I'm going to give this grad student 10%. So it can be all over the place in terms of the allocation of the equity. One thing you do definitely want to think about is vesting the equity. So what happens if you get together and you do this partnership agreement, you start working on the company together, and then all of a sudden, your partner disappears? Do they still own 50% of the company? Right? What happens if they come back 2 years from now and you're Facebook and they say, oh yeah, as a founder, I want my 50%, right? So you want to make sure that in your agreements, you've got some idea of vesting of stock over time. So if the 2 of you have been building the company for a year or for 2 years, you each own a certain percentage, but if one of you takes off, then that equity goes back to the company so that you can then use that equity to recruit another founder, right? You need to have that equity to be able to bring on people because typically a startup doesn't necessarily have a lot of cash, so you use equity as a way to recruit people. In terms of bringing on employees and senior executives and those types of things, typically, what's the definition of a founder? A founder is the person who was there at the beginning, right? But if you bring on a CEO a few months in, would you still call them a founding CEO? Potentially, if it means something to them and you're still early enough in the process to give them that kind of a cachet or whatever you want to call it. Now, they wouldn't be a founder in terms of your initial financing documents. They might get founder equity, if you've allocated a portion of your founder equity to find a CEO to bring into your company. CEOs in early stage companies typically get 5 to 10% of the equity. So you want to allocate a significant chunk to that, depending on the stage of the company as well and how many financing rounds you'll be working through. So I actually have a slide right after this where I actually show how the equity allocation typically, there's no typical really, but an example of how equity allocation can be distributed over time. Should you give stock options? My opinion is absolutely. Every single person who works for your company, in my opinion, should have stock options, and that's just so they feel like they have an ownership stake in the company. And those stock options will pay for themselves 10 times over, because if people feel that they are an owner in the company, they work the long hours, they're not as demanding in terms of salary requests, they just feel more of an ownership and commitment to the company than they would if they didn't have the stock options. And you can see that, even a big company like RIM offered stock options for a long time, and now they've stopped offering stock options. And there's this real dichotomy between the people who had the stock options and the people who don't have the stock options in terms of how they feel about the company. And it's a very good motivator. Now, that being said, you also have to be aware that if the company gets into trouble, people are also more personally involved in the company, so they feel it more because part of their ownership is tied to the company. In fact, there are a lot of people, so during the dot-com bubble, everybody loved stock options. Then when the crash happened, nobody wanted stock options. They just wanted big salaries because they didn't value stock options anymore. I think now, though, people are starting to value stock options again, so it's all part of the equity, the compensation package. What is dilution? Okay, so over time, and I'll just flip to the next slide for a second. So this is an example of dilution. Okay, so this is a traditional venture capital financed company or a traditional angel financed company. Okay, so you start at the beginning, each of you has 50% of the company, 2 founders. You do your angel round. The angels take, well, they'll have their 20% of the company. You allocate 10% to your stock option pool, and the founders are left with 70%. Okay, so the founders have been diluted from owning 100% of the company to owning 70% of the company, but they've brought in an investor and they've allocated some options for their employees. So you can see that over time, depending on how much financing you need to raise for your company, as a founder, your equity allocation gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And again, this brings me back to my point about revenue. Okay, the more money you can make on your own, the less money you have to raise from others, the more of the company you get to keep for yourself. Okay, it's a very simple math equation. Okay, you do not want to raise money from other people if you don't have to. Okay, if there's a real strategic reason to raise money, then go out and try to raise the money. But if you can fund your company based on revenues or potentially debt that you can pay back without having an equity component to it, it's absolutely the best route to go. Okay? And in Ali's case, how do I go up? There we go. In Ali's case, where he took money from strategic angels, that's huge value. That's a strategic reason to raise money. These guys that he's got around his table now not only bring money, but they open a ton of doors. They have a ton of expertise, and so they're adding value beyond the money. So you want to think about that as well. And then talking about valuation a little bit. So how much is my company worth? When you go to talk to a potential person for financing, your company is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. Right? So don't spend any of your time thinking about the value of your company because it's worth what somebody's going to pay for it. And you think back to the days where you used to have garage sales, maybe you still have garage sales. If you go out and you put 10 cents on something, somebody comes by and they say, yeah, okay, I'll pay you 10 cents for it. They might have paid you 20, right? If you set the value of your company, you might be leaving money on the table. And bigger valuation is not always better. So somebody might say, oh yeah, your company is a $10 million valuation, but I'm going to have a 10x liquidation preference and blah, 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 and I'm going to have all these restrictive covenants, and at the end of the day, you get nothing because they've put all of these conditions on top of the magic number that you've agreed on in terms of valuation. So you really need to understand what the deal actually is. Okay, so from our perspective, what are we thinking about when we come into a venture capital investment on the equity side of things? And I really apologize for the very dense text, especially after Ali's so, concise PowerPoint slides. So the key thing that we think about these days is how much money is it going to take to get this company all the way through to exit? And as a venture capitalist, we're very focused on exit because that's when we sell your company or take your company public on a public market like the Toronto Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or something like that. And we can then take the money that we've invested in the company, the equity that we own in the company, and return that to our shareholders. Because we're just an intermediary. We just go between the entrepreneur and the people who have invested in us. And so we need to, at some point, return cash back to our investors. So these days, because venture capital is so scarce, we need to really think about how much money it's going to take to get the company from A to exit. And if we can't get the investors around the table at the very beginning, we won't make the investment because it's just too risky in terms of financing right now. So if it's a company that's going to take $2 million to get all the way to exit, we know we can do that on our own. We allocate about $9 million for every company that we invest in. But if it's a company that's going to take, and some wireless companies, if you're doing embedded wireless technology, can take $50 million, $60 million to get to exit, those types of deals are very difficult to do these days because there just aren't enough investors to get around the table to get that company to an exit. So we make sure we have a group around the table that can afford to make sure that this company is successful, and so that the company doesn't have much in the way of financing risk between now and exit. So we look at all of the different risk factors in a company before making an investment. We look at financing risk, we look at the team risk, so how experienced are people on the team. We look at the market risk, is it really crazy and dynamic with lots of competitors, or does the company have something that's really special and unique? We look at intellectual property risk. Have you filed patents? Is the technology that you've developed really, really difficult to copy? So defensibility. So we look at all these risk factors. Financing risk right now, I would say, is our #1 risk. Yes?
What do you mean by syndicate on the first point?
So good question. Syndicate is when a group of investors come together to do a deal together. So we syndicate the deal as opposed to doing the deal by ourselves. And we talk about them as syndicate investors because they're our partners. Yeah, there might be some lingo in here that seems like it's not lingo to me, but so please point that out. I wanted to talk a little bit about US investors as well, and just the whole concept of raising venture capital is, as I mentioned, difficult. We see so many entrepreneurs these days, they do their roadshow across Canada and they meet with everyone who is a venture capitalist right across Canada, and they get no's from every single person. And then they say, okay, well, that must be just because venture capital investors in Canada are risk averse, so we're going to do a roadshow through the US. And then they go and they meet with every single US investor across the US. Because the ecosystem is in such a state, it's almost impossible to raise venture capital right now because there's so little venture capital out there. There are pockets of venture capital. There are some VCs in Silicon Valley who have funds. There are some in Boston. There are some in New York. We may or may not still have cash, depending on how some of these government programs are being rolled out. There are maybe 3 or 4 Canadian investors who still have cash. So while you may have a fantastic, compelling business opportunity, it's just so difficult to raise venture capital financing right now that it's not worth your time. Okay? And most of the entrepreneurs that we see are too early to be raising venture capital, and I hate to say that because we're seed stage investors, but in order to attract capital from US investors, you need to be profitable and you need to be looking for growth capital. Okay, so angel investors are a different bucket. You can speak to their hearts, and if they're passionate about what it is you're building, you can attract them. But from a venture capital perspective, they like to invest in their backyards. They're typically lazy. Can't believe I'm saying about this, my own industry. But so in order for them to invest in your company, they want all of the financing risk to be mitigated. They want you to be cash flow positive, so they want you to be profitable, and they want to help you grow. That's their job when they're investing in Canada. They'll invest earlier if you live right down the street from them, and it's very easy for them to invest in your company. But they're so busy that getting on a plane and coming to Canada is a big stretch. We also think about dilution. You know, how much can we get for the next round? How many rounds are we going to have to go through to get to the exit? And ultimately, what might an exit price look like? And then we work all the way back and say, okay, is this a company that could potentially sell for $100 million? Or is this a company that's only ever going to sell for $2 or $3 million? Like some of the Apple iPhone apps might sell for a few million dollars. Some of them might sell for more than that, but I think that'll be pretty rare. So is this a company that if we put $5 million into the company, is that cash that we'll ever get back in terms of an exit sale price? Are the key employees incented properly? So coming back to equity, do the founders have enough equity in the business? Are they still motivated? Do they still see that there could be a good payday for them at the end of this opportunity? Or have they been diluted so far that there's just no incentive for them to work in the company anymore? Do the senior executives, do the key developers in the company, do they have enough equity in the business in order to be incented? All things we think about. Okay, so coming back to just doing the deal, you need to understand the structure to be able to negotiate. So get a lawyer involved, and a lawyer who's experienced in doing technology financing type transactions. This is even with an angel financed opportunity. Make sure you understand the deal. And there's a lot of information on the web these days about venture capitalists and angels. So make sure you do your research. I've just got 3 URLs there of VCs who are reputable, who have been sharing a lot of information with entrepreneurs. And a few years ago, what used to be a black box that nobody really understood very well, you can now, I mean, there's no excuse for not understanding how to finance your business or how financing your business operates today, because there's a wealth of information out there. All right, so you guys are going to save the world, just so you know, okay, especially within Canada. I tried to think about the technology ecosystem and the future of Canada and where I think the country is going and people who I believe can really make a difference in building this country. And I came at it a number of different ways, and I kept coming back to technology entrepreneurs. You know, in terms of the ecosystem, you guys are absolutely the key ingredient. And we, as the rest of the ecosystem, need to do everything we possibly can to support entrepreneurs in Canada, technology entrepreneurs in Canada. So I have really been trying over the last couple of years to do everything I possibly can besides writing a check. So if I can write a check, great, I will absolutely write you a check. But there's so much that we can do within this ecosystem that goes beyond writing a check. And I think that all of us need to do that to support technology entrepreneurs. So coming back to my thinking on revenue, I think the way that we can support you as entrepreneurs is helping you get to revenue more quickly. So 1, by really stressing the fact that revenue is key and it's important. And 2, by opening up as many doors as we possibly can for you so that you can generate revenue more quickly. Because the more quickly you generate revenue, the more power you will ultimately have when interacting with customers, when interacting with strategic partners, when interacting with potential investors. Okay, the more power you have on your side of the equation, the more opportunities you have, and you can make choices, right? So when RIM comes knocking on your door and says, hey, we want to acquire you, oh, and by the way, we know you're out of cash next week, therefore we're going to give you $100,000, you can say, you know what? We have customers, we have revenue, $100,000 is not enough. We've been working on this company for 5 years. If you want to buy us, you're going to have to do better than that, right? You'll have choices because you have customers, because you have revenue. So this is what's been coined now, apparently, Murphy's Law, which I think is fantastic. So if you have no revenue, you have no power. If you have a little bit of revenue, you actually have less power because people start valuing your company based on your revenue, and that's not a good position to be in when you only have a little bit of revenue. And then if you're self-sustainable, you have tons of power. So aim for that self-sustainability. Even if you have to grow small, you know, be small for a while and grow incrementally, you'll have so much more power at the end of the day than if you blow your brains out at the beginning and there's no real value or sustainability behind your company. I have no idea how I'm doing on time. Is there? Okay, perfect. Okay, so how do you build revenue? How do you become self-sustainable? So I tried to put some thoughts together on how to start building this network of people that you can go to and talk to about your business and start generating revenue. And one of the key things that I have found in talking to people and trying to build tech capital as a business is the more you can get people to talk about themselves, the more they're going to like you. I know that sounds sort of funny, but if you're just quiet and you ask them lots of questions and you get them to tell you all about themselves, they'll leave the meeting thinking, wow, that person's really smart, even though you said nothing and you just listened to them the whole time. Okay, so the more you can get them to talk about themselves, ask them questions, pick their brains for every intricacy of the market. You know, who do they know? What's their perspective on the market? What do they see the big challenges being? Who are they? What do they do for a living? Try and get as much information as you can so that you can then incorporate that information into the story about who you are and what you do. Because there's always a way that you can turn it to make it completely relevant to what it is you've developed. Okay, and the more they see relevancy between what they're doing and what you're doing, the more compelling that relationship is going to be going forward. I used to work at Pickstream, and Dave Caputo, who is now the founder and CEO of Sandvine, one of the big companies here in town, is incredible at doing this. And I can't tell you how many meetings I was in with him where he would just extract all of the information from all of the people around the table, be they potential customers, press, analysts, government. Recently, I've seen him do it with government. He listens to their perspective, and then he twists his message around and delivers it in this beautiful little package that they can then absorb in their language. So the more you listen, the more you incorporate other people's cares and desires into your message, the more effective they will receive it. Okay, so again, very dense text slide, but here are some questions as you start to sell your product that you might want to work through and think about. And I don't know, is there a place that these slides can be posted afterwards so that people don't have to be scribbling down these types of questions? But these are some of the questions that you might want to think about and work through before you actually start selling your product to someone. So ask them these questions. You know, why are they interested in what it is you've developed? Key question, and then you can totally deliver what they want back to them, right? How did they hear about you? Where's the value in the product? Okay, what do they see the value being? What pain point are you addressing for them? So there are a couple of different ways to come at a market. One, you can look at a market and you can try and find pain points within the market. So what's a good example? I'll take the Avasi example, for example. So they look at their customer base, which is carriers, and they have experience doing video compression. So they say to the carriers, what's your biggest pain as it relates to video and mobile? Well, the networks. Like the networks just can't handle video. So the Avasi guys are now working on compression for video to put it out over networks so that carriers can more easily distribute video over their infrastructure. Okay, so they looked at a pain point, they identified a solution, they built the solution based on a real customer pain. Okay, and then there are other industries like Facebook that nobody really sees coming, and all of a sudden they deliver this product that nobody realized was a pain, but now that it's there, if it went away, how would you communicate with everybody that you care about? Right? So it's not necessarily immediately addressing a pain, but people have absolutely built it into a need, and they see value in that. Okay, so you really want to try and identify value, try and identify the pain, and try and solve that pain. Integration, development, you know, are there pieces that are missing in your solution that need to be there for people to actually adopt it and start using it? Make sure that you've developed it with those things in mind. This is key, this first question here. How much would they be willing to pay for the product? Okay, and this, you know, so much these days is free. And again, I see the most amazing business opportunities come across my desk all day long. And the biggest question, you know, beyond how are we going to finance this company, if we're really interested in this question, is are people going to pay for this product? Because so many things people just will not pay for today. So you need to come up with an idea that is so compelling that you can actually charge money for. And I've heard some VCs, some investors, some entrepreneurs saying, if you have to charge money for this, you're doing the wrong thing. You want to be able to give it away for free, and you want to build a huge audience, and then you monetize through advertising, or you monetize through whatever, right? But our goal right now is to give it away for free so we can build a huge, humongous audience and make $1 gazillion based on something else, okay? Or once we flick the switch, we can't flick the switch until we have 10 million users, but once we flick the switch, then we'll have some amount of conversion and that'll fund our company. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that fall flat. Okay, so my philosophy is, and it may be wrong, but my philosophy is, if you charge something for your product, it might take longer to grow your business, but at least you're growing your business with people who are willing to pay for the product, right? If you give away your product for free, you might have 10 million users, okay, but none of them are willing to pay for the product. So you flick the switch and there's nobody there. Okay? I've also heard people say that 1% of any audience will pay for anything. Okay? So if you build a compelling product and you can build this huge, humongous network, and you can flick the switch, it works for some people, right? It works for Plenty of Fish. It worked for GeoSign. It works for Google. You know, there are some companies, it works for Facebook, that are doing this and have built real businesses based on these types of models. But it is so incredibly difficult to build an audience. So incredibly difficult. And I think people really don't think enough about how difficult it is to build that audience. Competitors, okay, in the digital media space, I was talking to an investor in New York a few months ago, and he said to me, how do you do any kind of venture capital investing in Canada? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, let's say you come across a company that you like in the digital media space. How do you do due diligence? And I said, well, I go out, I do my research, I do a bunch of research on the internet, I talk to a bunch of different companies, I talk to the team. Truly, my belief is that you invest in the team, and if the product needs to morph, the product morphs, but it's the team that you invest in. And then you invest. And he says, here's how I do it. I find a company that I like in the digital media space. I then go out and find the 50 people who are doing the exact same thing as that company. Oh, and by the way, they're within a 2-block radius of my office. I meet with all of them. I pick the company that I like the most, and I invest in that company. And then I share all of the information that I've gathered from meeting with all of these other 50 companies. And I, make sure that this company is going to win. So this is the type of thing that you guys are competing with. Okay, so be wary, one, of the investors that you're talking to, and two, realize that the competition in digital media and mobile, okay, is included in digital media for me, is so intense. Okay, how many fart iPhone apps are there, right? So make sure that the application that you are developing is compelling. It is defensible. Okay, so for example, in PostRank's case, that company has amazing defensibility. Why? Not because of patents. They have amazing defensibility because they have data that nobody else has. Okay, they have a kick-ass team, they execute, they're phenomenal on so many other levels, but from a defensibility perspective, they've got defensibility beyond a software patent. Okay, and some people completely discount software patents anyways, right? Okay, what else do we have here? Purchase decisions, understand how your customers are making purchase decisions, and make sure that you are following those processes. So sales distribution partner channel, again, heavy text. I need to fix these slides. One thing that I really don't think that entrepreneurs think about enough is the sales distribution channel relationship. And again, coming back to team. So how do you expand your team? How do you leverage your team beyond your core employees at your company? And the more you can get a sales distribution channel working for you, the faster you're going to be generating those sales, the faster you're going to be able to leverage what you've produced. So you think about what a Microsoft or a RIM or an Apple can do for the distribution of your product. Just think of the Apple iStore. Okay, so it's completely inundated with applications now, but at least people can get to your application, at least they can search and they can find your application within the Apple iStore. Whereas before, your application might have been on a website that's buried so deep that nobody would ever find it. Okay, so if you can become part of the RIM Partner Alliance program, they actually do joint marketing initiatives with you. They help you with product development. Microsoft has, I did not plan that. I just realized I have a, so Microsoft has their Biz Sparc program. Okay, so another opportunity to leverage a potentially massive partner. You can work through Biz Sparc to access a whole bunch of Microsoft resources that can help you then get your product to market more quickly. You can generate revenue more quickly. So look at these types of partner sales channel type relationships that you can develop and use them to leverage your sales opportunities. So here's something that we developed at Pickstream. Again, coming back to my startup experience. We mapped our industry ecosystem, and we tried to figure out who within this industry ecosystem we needed to partner with to get our product to market. These were all of the different buckets that needed to be in place for our product to be successful. Okay, Okay, so major sales, distribution, partnership, relationship stuff going on at this company. We actually had partner relationship managers that we had to hire in order to manage some of these relationships. So you can see a bunch of different buckets within the industry. So think about your product that you're developing. Think about all of the pieces around your product that need to be in place for your product to get from you to the customer. And map those out. Figure out who those companies are. Then figure out who within those companies you need to talk to. And then figure out how you're going to get in front of those people. Okay, so 3-stage process. And getting in front of those people is sometimes challenging. So that's where you start leveraging folks like the folks at VeloCity, folks at Microsoft, folks at Tech Capital. Get on LinkedIn, link to us, figure out who we know, reach out if you need introductions, and make sure you're talking to the people who matter in your industry. Okay, so in my opinion, it's all about relationships. And I've spent a good chunk of my career trying to build relationships with people. I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I can talk to anybody. And it has taken me 15 years of pretty intense networking, relationship building to get to this point. Okay, so it is ongoing. It doesn't happen overnight. You really have to have a strategy behind building your relationships with people. And you really need to add value for people to want to work with you and to build relationships with you. So think about how you're building relationships today. Think about the people who you're in classes with today. Those people are going to be the leaders of technology companies tomorrow. Okay? Don't discount that. UW grads are everywhere, and they are phenomenal. They are so talented. So make sure you keep in touch with the people that you're going to school with now, because you will be amazed where some of your classmates and where you will end up in 10 years from now. Okay? How I build my network. So I have a pretty clear objective of what my network building is right now. It's all about making sure that I'm doing everything I possibly can to connect Canadian entrepreneurs to the people that can help them generate more revenue more quickly. So I have a very clear objective. I have a hit list of companies that I believe Canadian technology entrepreneurs need to be connected with. I'm reaching out to those companies where I don't have relationships already. I am going to events where I know those people are going to be there. I am calling them, I'm emailing them, I'm setting up meetings, I'm telling them about Canadian entrepreneurs, and I'm providing value so that I can build that connection with these people. And I'm listening, I'm following up, I'm tracking all of my interactions with these people. So people might think I'm a little bit obsessed with this, but I absolutely am, and it's paying dividends. Okay, so every time I have an interaction with someone, archaic, I shouldn't say this too loud, but in Outlook, I go in, and for each contact that I have in Outlook, I have the date that I last interacted with the person and what we talked about and any follow-up action items that I need to follow up on. And I just use Outlook as my contact management system. And it works just fine for me. So you don't need a fancy contact management system. You just need something where you can keep track of the people that you know. You can search the people that you know. You get where they can add value to your company and where you can add value to their company. And you just need to reach out to them every once in a while and make sure that you're continuing to build that relationship. Okay, it's all about trust. It's all about time. It's all about building. And here are some of the other tools that I use just to keep on top of what people are doing. I'm completely inundated with information. So from time to time I go dark. But subscribing to the blogs of people who you think are important and relevant in your world, and as they talk about things that are important and relevant to you, communicating with them about it, posting comments on their blogs, emailing them, direct messaging them on Twitter, reaching out. LinkedIn has been an incredibly valuable tool for me. So if you guys aren't on LinkedIn yet, I would suggest getting on LinkedIn today. And if you send me a note saying that you were in this presentation and that you would like to link with me, I will absolutely accept you to be part of my LinkedIn network. I'm very happy to share my network with you. My only caveat to that is I need to know a little bit about who you are and what you do. And you need to be open to being connected to people. Okay, so if somebody contacts me 10 years from now and says, hey, I noticed that you're connected to superstar X, who I met here today, when I email you, you have to be cool with being introduced to that person, because that's what I'm all about, okay? Jigsaw is something that a lot of people don't know about yet, but has been amazing for me. It's essentially a database of people's business cards. So people upload other people's business cards, and you can go on there and you can find contact information for almost anybody. And when I mean almost anybody, I mean almost anybody. Okay, so I have been able to reach out to so many more people just by using LinkedIn. I go into LinkedIn and I search for keywords for people that, you know, I want to access the head of corporate development for Google, okay, who is Canadian, by the way, and I identify that he's Canadian by looking at his LinkedIn profile. I can see what schools he went to, okay, and then I take his contact information. I go to Jigsaw and I can get his business card. Then I have his email address. I can shoot him an email, introduce myself, try to offer value. And I can't tell you how many fantastic relationships I've been able to build just by doing that, just by reaching out. We as Canadians do not do that enough. Okay, we need to be more aggressive. We need to be selling ourselves more. We need to be out there more. Twitter, blog, get on Twitter, talk about what you care about. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can build a community of people who also care about what you care about, who are probably also in a similar industry to you. Blogging, a great way to get your message out there. Okay, but you want to make sure that you're participating in the community, not just plugging information into a void that nobody's paying attention to and that you're not interacting with anybody else. It's all about interactions between people. Organizations in this community, they're fantastic. VeloCity, the bar camps, the startup camps, I would very strongly encourage you to participate in those things. There are a lot of community builders at those events who are passionate about helping emerging entrepreneurs and absolutely want to help you. Folks like Mick, who is working with Sun right now, and Rogers, and has worked with other companies in the past and has a ton of connections. Folks like David Crow at Microsoft, who's absolutely connected and will hook you up with folks that he knows right across the country here and into the US. There are wonderful people out there who are very interested in helping entrepreneurs, and the more you plug into these organizations like Communitech, Mars, Oaktree, the more you can get access to these different programs and to people that they know. Now, you got to be careful that you don't get sucked into the programs that are not relevant to you. There are a lot of programs you can spend a ton of time wasting your precious, like right now, the things that are most important are time, or the thing that is most important right now is time. Okay, so don't waste your time. If you're involved in something that you think is wasting your time, get out of it, or don't say yes. Okay, too often we say yes and we realize this is adding absolutely no value to my life, so don't participate in those types of things. And be really careful not to drink the Kool-Aid. There's a lot of Kool-Aid drinking that goes on in the startup ecosystem where everybody tells each other how wonderful they are and how they're developing great products. You need to reach out beyond your friends and family within the startup ecosystem and actually talk to people who are in your industry, your specific industry, your customers, your strategic partners, people who are actually going to pay for the product. And make sure that you're getting feedback from the people who matter, not just the people who love you, right? Not that the people who love you don't matter. They absolutely matter. And provide more value than you consume. So give back, very key. If you become a consumer of all of this wonderful help and you never give back in the way of connecting other people or giving back to community, then very quickly the tap turns off. So make sure you're giving back. And travel. Get on a plane. Experience startups all over the place. Especially, make sure that it's industry focused and that you're doing it with the ultimate goal of generating more revenue for your company. Okay, so make sure it's targeted and specific and you have a clear objective. But do not be afraid of travel. Do not be afraid of reaching out beyond your neighborhood, because that's absolutely key. And that's it. Oh, look at that. Pretty good, eh? Anybody have any questions about things that I might not have covered that you wanted to talk about? I didn't talk a lot about team building, but I can certainly talk more about that. Yes, Ali.
Yeah. You mentioned like the challenges the VC industry is having in Canada. What bad thing will happen if like, let's say, the remaining three VCs disappear around the time? What's going to happen? Like, what's the message to the government that we need to send if we don't support it?
What bad is going to happen? I think if you look at the Canadian technology ecosystem right now, I think we're sort of in the bad. I mean, there will be fewer companies funded. I think we'll definitely be creating a different kind of company. So we'll completely lose all of the deep technology expertise that requires deep pockets. We'll still have angels. We'll still have a lot of application layer type companies that don't require a lot of financing, that can get to revenue very quickly and can self-sustain. I think some of the angels will go away because they won't have the follow-on funding to come behind them. We're definitely already a lot more reliant on our angel community, so Tech Capital is partnering more and more with angels every day. And it's wonderful. I love working with the angels. They're passionate and they add huge value, which is really important. I don't think the VC community is going to go away. I think there are still, the only thing that worries me about government intervention is it's government intervention, right? So it needs to be a short-term bang. We need to be able to prove that we can do what we've been doing, so we just need a little bit more time. And then it needs to be self-sustainable, right? So if you look at what Quebec has done, I think what Quebec has done is phenomenal, where they've tried to build a whole ecosystem. Government has got involved in building a whole ecosystem. The Ontario initiatives, I think, are a little bit weaker in that it's more of a Band-Aid type solution. So it's a difficult problem to solve because there are good VCs, there are bad VCs, there are good entrepreneurs, there are bad entrepreneurs, right? I mean, it's how does government figure that out? And I think that's really difficult for them to do. And they also move incredibly slowly. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's a challenging question to answer. But from your perspective, you just need to think about not wasting your time. So don't pitch to VCs. VCs should come to you. Seriously, we should come to you. We should be the ones digging around, trying to find the best opportunity. I went to PostRank. I contacted PostRank before PostRank contacted us. Okay, so that's our job. We need to be doing that. Okay, so don't waste your time researching which VCs you should talk to, doing your road shows. Focus on building your business. That's the message you need to focus on.
Do you see a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs now going down south to the States for investment or to actually locating the company in the States? And do you see that as an advantage to them?
I see some doing that. I don't see tons. I'd say the majority are still staying here and building here. I'm not sure if that's a comfort thing or a lack of visa thing, or I'm not sure what's driving that. I think that we often have a view that the grass is greener in the US, and I see a lot of people coming back from the US as well. So I think there's definite value in being close to your customer. Okay, so bar none, value in being close to your customer, being close to your strategic partner. Your kids play soccer with the kids of the founders of Google. Yeah, that's a good thing because you can talk to Sergey on the sidelines and you can get some business going, right? Here we have that opportunity with companies like RIM and OpenText and Christie Digital, and there are a lot of big players here as well. I don't think we take advantage of those opportunities. I think a lot of us focus on technology development here instead of reaching out. I also think you can get on a plane and build a lot of those relationships remotely, which is what I've been doing. I think, so interesting things about Silicon Valley, there's definitely energy there. There's definitely a higher density of startups, a higher density of talent. There's more competition for talent. There's a higher density of venture capital firms there, but there's more competition for venture capital there. So I'm not sure, I really don't know if you have a better or a worse chance of being successful if you're there or if you're here. I do believe that there are some VCs that if you can get financing from those VCs, you absolutely have a leg up, like Brad Feld and Fred Wilson, because they market. They sell their companies. But if it's just a random VC that, they're just based in the valley, I don't know that that's going to give you any kind of huge advantage. But, any other questions? Yes?
The whole funding thing in the venture capital is a very intimidating subject for a lot of people who are just getting into their companies and just kind of looking to innovate. So how does this whole funding and kind of that whole space that you're involved with work with students and young people at a really early stage to kind of get them to continue innovating, and eventually they'll get into the whole venture capital thing, but how do you kind of support them at early level so they don't just kind of go back into corporate life and the internship, that they do see that their idea has potential to innovate and kind of drive a business?
Yeah, good question. So we reach out to students as much as we possibly can. So we support the bar camps and the startup camps. We try to get to them ourselves as much as we possibly can. We try to be accessible. So if you ever want to come and have a chat off the record, please feel free to come in and ask any questions and check us out. We are at Tech Capital definitely the most friendly, approachable VC you will ever meet. So if you want an easy entry into speaking to VCs, I would highly suggest talking to us. There are some VCs that are quite intimidating for sure. They're even intimidating to me, and I've been doing this for 9 years. But I think that there are some that are just plain mean. And I think that partially there's a self-selection, I think, that goes on there. The people who, there might have been one mean VC and then that person went out and hired more of his mean VC friends and then the whole firm is mean. But I think, I think by talking to other entrepreneurs, you can figure out who those firms are and you just stay away from those firms.
Tell us who it is.
I think you know. But yeah, I think in general, there are a lot of great investors out there. Talking to these guys, I mean, they know they've made that transition. They've worked with venture capital firms before. They can give you a lot of guidance. Talk to Ilya if you want to know what it's like working with us. And yeah, I don't know. Participating in community events, I'd say, is probably your easiest transition into that whole world. But put your kids in soccer. I'll be on the sidelines.
Jacqui, most of these folks are the kids in soccer.
Shh. What, you don't have kids yet? What's wrong with you? When Ali was, but that's an excellent point. When Ali was talking about his friend who had a baby, I was thinking to myself, what an amazing opportunity you all have right now, because you don't have those burdens. They're wonderful burdens. Okay, but honestly, this is such an amazing opportunity for you right now because you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you don't have a lot of the baggage that you'll have a few years from now, potentially. So,
A lot of the inertia.
Inertia?
Things that require force of money to move.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah, money is important once you get those things. So right now you can do the ramen noodle diet, you can starve, and you can build a startup, and it doesn't matter to anybody except for you and your buddies that you decide to do the startup with, right? So try it, right? It's an amazing opportunity. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I absolutely would follow that path. I would not go corporate, absolutely not go corporate. Try it maybe for a co-op work term or something like that. Get a sense of for what it's like. You can always go back to that. But you're never, ever going to have the opportunity to do your own thing with no inertia like you have right now. So.
And there are lots of startups that are hiring people like your age who want to train you, who want you to come and join them, who want you to experience that, who are willing to give you all of that so that if you wanted to then get that taste, you could go off and build your own if it's kind of too scary to do it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to talk about it later, but there's nothing wrong with going to work for a startup and an entrepreneur. It's probably one of the best companies in the world, sitting you have 12 inches in front of me?
Yeah, and 12 inches to your left.
And over this way.
Yeah.
You know, these are folks who have built entrepreneurial cultures, and there's not everyone can be a founder, because if everyone's a founder, we're all one and two person shops.
Yeah.
You know, the hard part is it's figuring out who those folks are going to give you the opportunity to go out and see what's really cool, and let you make mistakes and fail in an environment that rewards you for it.
And you get to see. Yeah, and you get to see a big picture, right? If you go work for a big company, you get to do this for that big company, right? If you go to work for a startup, they let you build the next version of the product, okay? Or they get you to run the entire customer support department, right? Like
Dave McCoy's title, his Twitter ID is 500 hats.
Yeah.
Because that's how many he wears in the startups that he works with.
Yeah. So.
And corporations, should you decide to go back, if you are worried or your parents are on you about your career or anything like that, which I remember mine were.
Parents just don't understand.
Well, my point is that every corporation I've ever worked for, Mozilla Firefox, Yahoo, CGI, values tremendously that entrepreneurial experience. They look at you and they value higher than an MBA because you've been on the ground in a startup trying to do real things. And so your experience in that is much more valuable to them than where you were just a graduate out of school or even with an MBA. And this I've heard from all of those companies.
Perfect. So I'm going to wrap things up because I got to go to Kung Fu.
Does that come with the me VCs?
This is my second class.
Entrepreneurial judo.
I don't know what I'm doing, so if I'm late, I'm going to be in big trouble.
Push-ups.
Yeah, they tell me I'm not as flexible as my daughter, which is upsetting to me, but
Well, thank you, Jacqui.
thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.